Hey everyone, welcome back to the Contractor Growth Network Podcast. I'm here again with Ian.
What's up?
Ian already said what's up. Today we're going to talk about why client testimonials are so important for contractors' business and growth. So Ian, tell me a little bit about your experience with client testimonials and why you're here to talk about it.
Yeah, testimonials are, honestly, they don't just apply to contractors. Testimonials are a critical component, I think, of pretty much any business, right? Whether it's a service or a product, people crave the feedback of their peers, right? They want somebody that they can trust, someone that they feel like is going to experience that product or that service in the same way that they are telling them about the quality of that service, right? So at the end of the day, right, a real, genuine testimonial from somebody about your product or your service is one of the best pieces of marketing you can produce because it is inherently trustworthy, right? So as a person looking for services, when I'm trying to go through the internet or through social media or whatever, right, it's a lot of companies telling me how great they are, right? And of course, right, if you work for a company or you're producing an ad for a company, you're not going to say it's terrible, right? You're going to say this stuff's great. But the problem with that is like we are so inundated with marketing messages these days that often can fall kind of on flat ears, right? So a really high quality testimonial has this authenticity to it that other types of marketing materials aren't going to be able to ever replicate, right? So in terms of my experience using them, I've used them in lots of stuff. I've used them in ad campaigns. I have used them on website landing pages. I have put them in email sequences. I think they fit in almost any type of marketing you can do. There is value and benefit to having a testimonial of some sort in that campaign.
Yeah, and I've edited some of those.
You have? You have.
Yeah, so
and then I've run ad campaigns from those ads.
Yeah, you have. Yeah. Those are fun times.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about testimonials for contractors, what are we? Let's break down what we mean by that, because I asked you a question earlier off the podcast, and I was talking about like Angi and
sure,
those are reviews.
Yeah,
what is a
review? A review is in a certain kind of way a kind of testimonial, but it's not quite the same. Partially because of the way you would use it, right? So typically a testimonial is something that you're going to have to go out and like actively solicit from an individual, right? Okay. Reviews, right? Again, they are kind of a testimonial of a kind, and they do have their place, and it's always beneficial to pursue reviews with your clients. And those snippets of text can be effective on landing pages as little quotes. But a testimonial is typically something where you are actively reaching out to a past customer and saying, hey, like, we'd love to know what you thought about our service, right? And that can come in the form of something that's written. Typically these days, though, most people expect that to be a video.
Video, yeah. Where would you mostly, because you've already kind of touched on this a little bit, like ads.
Yeah.
Where are the places you're going to be seeing these or use them primarily?
Really all over the place, right?
Okay.
So quotes from testimonials as like a feature of a website page is pretty like typical at this point, right? Like if you are running a business for a long enough time, if you had clients, most people are going to grab, right, like a reference from somebody and put that on their website page as what's called social proof, right? Also on landing pages, video testimonials make a great resource, right? So you're demonstrating right at the top of the page like who you are and what you do, right? And then you're getting a little further down the page and people are asking, okay, so like why should I choose you? Like what's the difference between you and somebody else? Everybody says they can do plumbing. Everybody says they can do electrical. Having a testimonial video on that page where they can watch and say, right, see from somebody that has paid for your service in the past, like what your processes are like, what your customer service is like, how happy they are with the end result. That can be huge. I think they also make really effective emails, auto emailers, right? So if somebody fills out a form on your website, sending them directly a testimonial like about your business can be a really effective tool at prepping them for the sales call, right? So if you're able to sort of give them a sense of confidence even before they get on that call, that can really increase the level of trust they have for you, right? So I think they're very effective in that location, and then they make phenomenal ads as well, right? So like we've said, that credibility plays really, really well to audiences that are seeking your services and asking questions about what kind of business they're going to end up working with. They also fit very well into the social media world, right? Because they have that level of sort of realness to them, which is something that a lot of people expect with social media. It's not as much of a place for highly produced content, something that is a little bit, not to say like you shouldn't be editing your testimonials,
Sure. Yeah.
but because it is a real person and not an actor, right, the way they're going to present themselves isn't like it is a polished piece of marketing content. They're going to talk like a person. They're going to talk about their experience, and that is going to translate as authenticity to the end user. So I think they make very good pieces of social content and very good social ads as well.
So why is it that people they trust more from like their peers? You touched on this in the intro a little bit, but why do they want to hear it from a customer versus, hearing it from you? Like, why do they trust that more?
Yeah, again, it really comes down to are you a credible voice, right, for me? And you can get to a place with a company, right, with a brand where you're like, yeah, I trust this brand. But typically that comes from your own experience of the product.
Sure.
Right? So if I, for instance, am a fan of the company that I bought this hat from, but the reason that I will buy from them again and not worried about looking at reviews is because I've owned this hat for a while, right? I've been wearing it. I like it. It fits well. It hasn't fallen apart, right? And so now I have trust with that brand. Right, but it required me to have that personal experience of the product. So when somebody hasn't had that yet, you have no credibility with that person, right? When they have not had that direct experience with your organization, that direct positive experience, you're just another person on the internet saying that your stuff is better than the next guy's. And the thing is, that guy's saying the same thing, right? And so's the next guy, so's the next guy, so's the next guy, right? So when you are prospecting, right, and you're looking for new customers, those people do not have any trust with you as an organization. Testimonials can be a way to overcome that hurdle, right? So because they are not incentivized to promote your business in any way, right, because they are just sharing their authentic experience with your company, that will come across as much more trustworthy, right?
Sure.
So when you are in that environment of not working with repeat customers, not working with people that already know, like, and trust your brand, you are working with people that have no real reference point. A testimonial is going to be far more effective at convincing them that you actually do a good job than you saying it.
Yeah, so that kind of feels very similar to like reviews on Google.
Yeah, for sure.
Very similar, like even Angi, where, you're not getting paid to do it. You aren't a member of the company itself. You are just a raving fan.
For sure.
So I can completely get that. That's kind of how I buy myself.
It's how everybody buys.
True. Yeah, that's very, very fair. Now, could you think of like why? How have we become to that? Because it used to be, you found a brand you would buy off of like commercials and stuff, and there wasn't really necessarily a review process. There was no Google or Angi before this. Like, how have we changed into this?
Part of it is just like the multitude of options, right? So there was a day where you saw something on the TV, and that might be the only ad for that kind of product that you'd ever see, right? Maybe you'd see another one in a year from a different company, but maybe you'd never, ever see another ad for that product specifically. But it wasn't because there weren't other options. It's just because not everyone was advertising as heavily, right?
Gotcha.
With the advent of the internet, every company does marketing of some kind. Right? Maybe some don't, right? But the overwhelming majority have a website, maybe have a social media account, maybe they run some ads, maybe they do some emails, right? And there is just this profusion of both like number of companies, but number of advertisements, right? And as a result, trust in brands, right, advertising to you has declined, but also trust specifically of new brands, right? So and again, that comes down to experience, right? Coca-Cola, I know what I'm getting, right? So Coke runs
unless you get one of their new flavors. Unless you get one of their new flavors.
Yeah, I don't do
Both
that.
Coca-Cola and Pepsi have come out with a lot of crazy flavors.
Are any of them good?
I haven't tried them.
Yeah, honestly.
Because I stick with the just the
original.
classic.
You know,
yeah.
you're right. The thing
exactly.
that you know, the thing
right.
that you trust. Right, like they're with a brand that has this established history. They have all these people, right, that have tried their product. You've heard about that product from other people. Other people say it's good, right? That's a different environment. They can advertise. Honestly, Coke doesn't really need to advertise. But they can advertise all day, right? And it's just a reminder to you, hey, there's that thing that I like, and I'll buy it.
Yep.
With a new brand, there's no like I'm not my neighbor hasn't used them. Right, I can't ask my peers like, hey, what did you think about this service? Because they haven't used them. It's too small of a company, right? So your exposure to other people that are going to affirm to you that is a good purchase, right, is small, right? So it's a combination of those two things. It's just profusion of marketing messages. There's so much out there. It's become sort of white noise, right? Everybody says great stuff about their company. You hear them all the time. They're everywhere. They're in your internet browser. They're on the radio. They're in your podcast. They're in your email inbox. Honestly, now they're in your texts, right? Like they're everywhere. So that sort of constant inundation of marketing messages makes it into this sort of just background noise, right? I know personally as a user of the internet, I don't even notice the display ads on the side of the websites anymore.
Yeah,
right. Like they're just background noise. So it's a combination of those two things, right? If you're a brand that nobody knows, you're newer, you're smaller, you don't have that credibility, right, to play off of people's peer networks. And then it's just this profusion of marketing messages. There's too much out there, right? And so that doesn't land the way that it used to. Gotcha.
Now, you kind of answered this already, but video versus written testimonials, which one's better?
It's not that one's better. They just both have their own place, right? Written testimonial reviews, right, have their own place. Like there's a lot of benefit to having a lot of good reviews on the different profiles that you're using to represent your business. Like that has real value. People will look for those. People find those to be credible. Written testimonials are great in terms of using it for copy on your website, copy in an email, using it as like a little quote block to help, reinforce your quality. But video testimonials, right, they have their own function, right? So it's really not a matter of one being better than the other. But what I would say is you do need both. And if you don't have video, right, you're kind of falling behind the times in terms of technology, right? So more and more, you probably heard me say this a million times on this podcast now, is like video content is becoming predominant in terms of how people are accessing and consuming information on the internet and on apps and on social media and whatever. So part of it is about making sure that you're staying contemporary, and then part of it is just like that's the kind of content people want to consume, right? So written content oftentimes gets sort of glanced at, whereas video content people will consume the entire thing if they're interested.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I'm a video guy, so I agree. Now, you know a lot about SEO. How do these testimonials, both video, written, how does that play into SEO? You kind of touched on paid ads already, and then marketing in general.
Yeah, so testimonials are big for what's called EEAT. Again, another thing I've probably said before, that is expertise, experience, authority, and trust.
And that's by Google.
That is a set of Google ranking factors. They are not the only people that have essentially that type of ranking factor. So Bing has its own sort of formulation. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but many search engines use a similar framework. Essentially, it is a way of demonstrating that you have done the work before, that you're excellent at that work, right? That you're an authority in that space, right? You have something like productive to add to the conversation, and that people trust you, right, and that you're a trustworthy source. A testimonial really ticks basically all of those boxes, right? A really effective testimonial is going to demonstrate, right, that you've done the work before, right, because you're talking to a client that's bought it for you, that you are an expert, right, at that. Because, right, again, like these people are saying, like, hey, they did a really, really good job, that you have something authoritative to say, right? Like there's other people affirming that you're a worthwhile person to listen to and trust, right? It comes down to like these people literally trust you, right? They trust you so much that they're willing to go out of their way to provide you with marketing materials, right? At no benefit to them, right? So EEAT is satisfied pretty heavily by using testimonials in your content, right? So if you can produce, right, a page that sort of details the project that you've completed, and as a part of that page, you have a testimonial, both some written testimonial elements and the video, right? That as a whole is a very compelling piece of content that clearly demonstrates EEAT. So in terms of SEO, big, very effective. They make by themselves phenomenal ads, right? So like just basically showing somebody like, here's what we do, here's somebody that's happy with the outcome. It's a very organic way to market your business of just saying like, hey, we're not, it's not like, hey, you get 2,000 off for like the next 9 months only or whatever, buy now. Like it's not any of that. It's very like just real, like here's our product. You can see it with your own eyes, right? In this video, it looks good. Here's these people that bought this thing that said our service quality is great, that our timing was great, and that they're happy with the end product and they'd buy it again, right? So both of those places, super effective. And again, I know I'm kind of rehashing ground here, but they make really effective autoresponders for email as well, right? So
autoresponders?
Yeah, so if somebody like fills out a form on your website, right, you can use your CRM to basically send out an automated email, right, with some information about your business.
Gotcha. So kind of like, hey, these people bought these. If you're on the fence, here's something that like someone who was like you.
Correct.
And they
so
purchased from us.
let's say, again, in our context, right, we're selling SEO, right? So somebody goes to our SEO page, they fill out the form, they express interest in SEO, and then right after they sort of set up that initial call, right, they're not ready to buy yet, but they're curious, right? And so they've sent us their contact information. Right after they do that, they get an email in their inbox that has a video of one of our satisfied SEO clients talking about their experience, talking about the impact on their business, right? That is going to be a significant boost in confidence for them, saying like, hey, yeah, like, okay, like these people obviously know what they're doing because here's a person that bought it before me saying it's good.
Gotcha. Now, what are some, because you talked about putting it as an ad, putting it on your website, are there any other like innovative, like creative ways to use these use these testimonials that our contractors could do?
I mean, yeah, I'm sure there are. You can send them out through SMS. I mean, at the end of the day, right, like delivery vehicles are just delivery vehicles.
Sure.
Right.
It's more about the testimonial
itself.
It's
more about the content itself.
Yeah.
Right. So we could talk about, you want to run an OTT ad? Sure. Right. Like, but that comes down to sort of your particular market, right? How you deliver it is not as important because your delivery vehicle is more about making sure you're capturing your audience. Right. So you want to be advertising where the people that buy your product are, right? And depending on the demographics, depending on where they live, depending on their income, right, that's going to change. So some people may be more present on Facebook, others may be more present on Instagram, others may be more present on YouTube, right? That's really specific to the use case of a particular business. But the content itself is going to be effective really no matter the sort of delivery situation.
So it sounds like you have to know your own market and where they are consuming your content.
For sure. But that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, right. That's a different podcast.
That's a different podcast.
A different podcast episode. Still this podcast, just a different episode.
Yeah.
Got you. And let's talk more about like stuff that our contractors could actually do. So when do you think is the optimal time for them to like request a testimonial?
At the beginning of the project.
Beginning of the project.
So
why is that?
Because you are asking for something, right? And you are asking for something in return for very little, right? If you sort of set the expectation at the beginning of the project, it will be perceived kind of like a form of payment for a job well done. Right.
Okay. Like a tip.
Yeah. You're saying is like, hey, you know what? Like if we do a really good job here, right? If like we nail this and you love the experience and you love the product at the end of the day, would you be willing to do this for us, right? Would you be willing to do a testimonial and sit down and whatever? And most of the time, right, like in that frame of reference, it's pretty casual. People are going to say yes, right? They're going to be like, yeah, I could do that, right? And then if you really have standout service and your product crushes it and they love it, you just circle back around, right? They've already committed to it, and you're like, hey, like I know you've loved this so much, and you're kind of riding that high as well with them, right? Like they've just gotten this thing that they've waited for so long, and they're happy with it, they're satisfied with it, right? And so you're kind of just using that momentum, that energy, that satisfaction they have with the product, plus that prior commitment to just sort of push them over the line of, like we'll do that for you. I think most of the time when you set that expectation up front, it really is pretty easy to get people to commit to that.
Okay. And if you forget, like, what's the problem with asking like at the end? Like, you did a good job.
Oh, no. There's nothing wrong with it.
Okay.
It just may not be as effective.
Got you.
Right?
The most effective is in the beginning, and then you remind them at the end too?
Yeah, 100%. And I honestly remind them along the way, right? Like as you're doing the project, say like, hey, like, you happy with things? Like check in with them. Like use it as a place to and just remind them like, hey, yeah, like you still up to do that testimonial for us at the end, right? And that's more about what it is. Like the longer you give them time to sort of think about it and anticipate it and prep for it, right? They're more likely to sort of engage with that. If you come in at the end, you're like, hey, is this thing that you could do for us? It kind of seems like a side item, right? And so they may not perceive it as critical.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
And so they'll be like, yeah, we could do it. And they'll probably push it off a little bit because they haven't set aside time for it. You haven't planned for it, which again is another thing you need to do is like prep time to do this thing pretty much right after the project is completed, or if they need more time, right, whatever. But make sure you have like a date. But if you're asking at the end, right, then you're doing all of that planning at the end, right? And the further that you get away from the project,
the less likely
they are to come back and be willing to do that, right? So even with reviews, typically when you want somebody to leave you a review is right after they've had the experience, right? Because that is when they are feeling basically, and this is more of a psychology thing, states of agitation, right, and whether those are positive or negative or whatever, they motivate people towards action, right? So if somebody's feeling really excited about something and you ask them to do something, they're significantly more likely to do that thing. If you give them 6 months to perceive this thing as a normal part of their life, right, they are not going to have that same level of excitement about it, and they're much less likely to say yes.
I know this is going a little bit further back, but I know we've gone out to shoot video testimonials for clients. And I remember we've had some that like the project was done 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And we'd ask questions and they're like, yeah, I don't really remember enough to answer that question.
Sure.
And it costs, the emotion part of that video testimonial.
Yeah.
Because
it's just normal life now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that thing is the further you get away from something new, the more common it becomes.
Yeah.
Right. Eventually, that beautiful kitchen that you just remodeled is just your kitchen again. Mm-hmm. Right. And you need to make sure that you're capturing that excitement, because that excitement is a part of what sells the testimonial as well. Right. Like getting oh yeah, we did this thing and it was good and I like it and it's got some cool stuff in it. Like that is not a compelling testimonial.
Sure.
Whereas saying like, oh my goodness, like I can't believe that it was a big investment, but like they did a great job and I'm so happy with it. Like that level of energy only comes through when you're actively experiencing the real emotions around that thing, and that is time bound. Right? Eventually, given enough time, everything becomes mundane. Right? So you need to make sure that you're capturing that excitement, and the best time to do that is right after they're experiencing it.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say is the best way to best methods to kind of ask for this?
Personally, in person.
In person.
Right? Like you're already going to be at their house doing the job, right? So you should be, throughout the project, building a relationship with these homeowners, right? That again, that's a separate thing, but something as a part of your process when you are doing work. You're not just there to sort of tick a box. You're in these people's homes, right? You're going to be a part of their lives for a period of time. Get to know them. Build that relationship, establish that trust, and then ask them in person, right? Of course, there's nothing wrong with emailing or phone or whatever, but nothing is going to be as effective as actually getting somebody over the line as walking up to them, looking them in the eye, shaking their hand, and saying, hey, can you please do this thing for me, right? Anytime that you use a digital medium, you are giving people an out, right? They have full freedom to say, I didn't see the text, I opened it, but I didn't respond, right? Or I was just really busy that day, right? There's so many ways that they can get around, right? Having that engagement and saying like, yeah, I'll do that. When they're right in front of you and you say, can you do this thing for me? It's a different situation, right? There's a degree, and again, this is you don't have to perceive it as negative, but there's social pressure, right?
Absolutely,
Like any time that you have a person-to-person interaction, there's a fundamental difference. So I always recommend ask in person. You're going to get better results.
I would also think that too, like if you're asking me in person, that means that it means more to you. If you just sent me an email, like secondarily,
it seems unimportant.
Right, it does. So I feel like you'd have more success asking in person because it just meant that much to you that you're willing to take this time while we're together, right?
100%.
Now, do we coach them? Maybe do we have a list of questions we want them to answer, or
definitely have a list of questions.
Definitely
have a list of questions. Coaching, I don't know if that's really the right word for it.
Okay, guide.
Sure.
I also had guide.
Yeah, I think you don't want it to feel fake, right? So you don't want people rehearsing answers. You don't want anything like that. What you do want is to make sure that you are asking the questions in a way that is going to get you a good response, right? So asking questions like, what did you have done, right? That's fine, right? It's a useful piece of information. But asking a question, how do you feel about it, right? That's going to get you the kind of emotional energy in that video that is going to be compelling to other people, right? So people need that opportunity to sort of connect with the narrative in order to feel like this is credible, right? If it's just a list of facts, it's just a bunch of information, that's not going to be particularly effective. That doesn't mean you don't need it, right? You still need to say like, hey, what's your name? Who are you? Where do you live? What did we do for you? But then once you get that piece of it out of the way, you then need to move into questions about, okay, like what did you love about the experience? What's your favorite feature in the kitchen, right? What is something about our communication that was particularly nice to you, right? Was there anything about the project that stood out, right? You're asking questions that are a little bit open-ended, thought-provoking, and more emotion-driven, because ultimately those answers are going to be the ones that provide the sort of meat to your testimonial in a way that the facts are not.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, we had a list of questions that we would ask too when we went on video shoots, which they all sounded very similar to something like that.
Well, I believe at one point I had a hand in helping you guys with some of those questions too.
Oh no, I don't know. I don't know if that's true.
You don't think so?
I don't think that's true. I don't know if that's true at all. That was definitely all us.
It was mostly you guys. It was.
What would you say are some obstacles or challenges that contractors might see in like overcoming or when asking for testimonials? Like, what are some obstacles that clients, they're just like, I don't want to do it?
Yeah, I think one that's not really about the client as much as it is about the business owner. A lot of business owners just feel uncomfortable asking.
Oh, okay.
Right? And so they won't do it because they're like, they don't want to.
Do you think they feel uncomfortable asking because they feel like it's, begging or like asking for praise?
It kind of depends on the person.
Sure.
I think for some people, they don't want to, it seems like an imposition, right?
Okay.
And they don't want to intrude. Other people, it's just like they're not the most socially like affable person and they find the situation a little uncomfortable. Some people, right, I think are worried that they're not going to get the response that they want, right?
Yeah.
And so they have sort of hesitations about the quality of their own work and and sometimes that's real, right? Sometimes like, hey, like you made a mistake, probably don't ask this person for a testimonial.
Sure. Yeah.
Other times it's just your own anxiety, right? You know your work so well, right, that you can see all the little things, right, that bother you but aren't going to bother your client. Right. So I think that's one hurdle is just like getting over the hump of asking, right? And just making sure like, hey, like set that upfront expectation, make sure that you're consistent, bring it up, and then connect with that person at the end. Again, the more that you build a social relationship with these people through the project, the easier it's going to be to do that. The other big thing I think is just not, right, really thinking about it in advance, right? Sort of it being this ad hoc thing that you sort of slap on at the end. And because of that, it often gets passed over, right? You're like, hey, this isn't you're not making it a priority. And because you're not making it a priority, oftentimes it just gets overlooked. Really, the other piece of it, there's some camera shyness sometimes with homeowners. Sometimes they're like, hey, you know what? I don't really want my life and my home out there on the internet, which is totally understandable. And you're going to get some of those. And then the other thing, big one is you've not done a good job, right? Like really truly, like
Right.
maybe you're good at producing the work, but your customer service is kind of crap, and as a result, you're struggling to get people to sort of commit to that because honestly, they don't have a ton of super positive stuff to say.
Now, I can tell you, majority of people are camera shy.
Yep.
I've put so many people on camera, and so many of them, usually they come back with like, I don't know what to say. I don't feel comfortable as soon as the camera gets in front of you. And one thing that we found that actually does tend to help a little bit is if you have previous videos that you've already made of these testimonials, you can send that to them so they get an expectation of what to expect. And they see it and they're like, oh, well, this person looks really good on camera. I could never do that. But if you sit there and like everyone's like that.
Yeah, 100%.
Everyone is like that. They look good on camera, but that's actually the videographer and the video editor's job to make them look that way. But we found in the past, a lot of people feel more comfortable once they see the final product and they know what they're getting themselves into. So if that's an obstacle, like, hey, I'm just not good on camera, if you have something to show them, show that to them.
Yeah.
Send that over.
That totally makes sense. Part of it too, though, I think is just affirming to them like we're gonna make you look good, right? Like and letting them have the space of like, hey, you know what? Like we got, again, it may not always be perfectly true, but saying like, hey, we got these tips and tricks, these things that we can do to make sure that it turns out all right. I think that gives people some confidence too.
Yeah. Now, are there any techniques to make sure that contractors are getting these like steady, or like do they need to be steady, like testimonials or?
Yeah, I mean, I say whatever you think your best work is at the time, assuming you're continuing to improve and the quality of product is continuing to improve, making sure that you're getting testimonials for those projects on a regular basis is critical. Of course, right, you can get to a point where you have more than enough, right, from like a volume perspective. But if your work is continuing to get better, right, you should be gathering new testimonials to demonstrate that. I will say also, like, there's value to being current as well, right? Like you can only run an ad with the same testimonial for so long before people get tired of it, right? So having new media, fresh media is always valuable from a marketing perspective because you may find, right, like, hey, like the testimonial we produced a year ago, we've learned some stuff even on like the videography side of things, and we're going to make it a little bit better this time. Or maybe the narrative in this one is a little bit better. But part of that is like you won't know any of that information. Like you won't see how to get better unless you keep doing it, right, and iterating on it. So I do think it's important to continue doing that. It's not like you need to be doing like one a week or anything like that.
That's a lot.
That's way too much. A
lot of contractors don't even have that many jobs.
Yeah. So, but like if you did a couple a year, right, like 1, 2, 3, something like that, like that's going to be more than enough, I think, to sustain you.
Now, I know it depends on brand and audience, but is there like a general rule? 'Cause you mentioned the content fatigue for like ads.
Yeah.
Is there a general rule of like, hey, we need 4 in a year?
There really isn't, unfortunately. It depends a lot on the quality of your content, how much money you're spending behind that campaign, and the size of your audience. Right, and those variables, right, they vary widely. Like if you're targeting Manhattan, there's a lot of people in Manhattan. You can run one ad for a long time there because there's so many potential viewers. Most of them are not going to have seen it, even if you've been running it for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. Right, like you have to spend a lot of money to sort of fatigue a piece of content with a population size that big.
But in a smaller town.
Yeah,
it may run out quicker.
For sure. But the beautiful thing is you don't need to know. The platform will tell you, right? The meta ads in particular, right? It literally has a label that will come up on that particular ad, and it will say, hey, you know what? This ad has been shown too many times to this audience. It's not going to be effective anymore. So part of it is just testing things out in your own market, right? Produce an ad, publish it, launch it, run it for a while, see what happens, right? You may find out you need a lot of freshness in your content. You may find out that you don't need so much, but that's going to be pretty idiosyncratic and depend on your situation.
Now, we've had in the past clients who have kind of paid for a testimonial or gifted for a testimonial or hired an actor even. what might be some implications of that? Is it recommended? What are your thoughts on that?
So when advertising, technically, you are supposed to communicate if you are using actors.
Gotcha. Is that like a law, or is that just...
To be honest, I'm not a lawyer.
Sure. Okay.
I don't
Fair.
know. What I do know is that it is generally frowned upon to produce fake content and then sell it as though it is real. Right. So it's not something I would recommend. But that said, right, like companies have been producing advertisements with actors for a long time, and they can be effective. So I'm not saying that they won't be effective. I would just encourage people to check the legality of pretending that this is a real consumer before you go publishing that on the internet. Reference like you've all seen those TV ads where it says, right, these are real people, not paid actors, or vice versa. You know, like
Chick-fil-A does them a lot.
Huh?
Chick-fil-A does them a lot. So they're real stories but paid actors, is what it says.
Sure, but
in
right,
the
but the fact that they feel the need to indicate that tells you there's probably some sort of legal consideration.
Yes.
And again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the specifics of it, but I would just check with somebody that is a lawyer before you do that.
Sure. Now, some people might think, okay, you got your real clients.
Yeah.
But they come off as nervous, or they don't have, like, their sentences aren't fully thought out.
Sure.
Why not do a script with an actor? Because that looks better. Like, if you had to choose one, like, do you still go with the real client that maybe doesn't present itself as well versus an actor?
Yes.
Why?
Because the stats are in content that is authentic performs better than content that is highly produced.
Okay.
Right? Honestly, like more and more, like, and then part of this is just an expectations thing. People consume a lot of their media on social media, and what that is individuals producing content for themselves, right? And so it comes across with a degree of authenticity, highly produced content. I think these days it's kind of a dime a dozen, right? Everybody has access to this ability to produce that if they want, usually if they have enough money or the skill set. So, right, authenticity is becoming more and more critical to get the kind of reach that you need, right? So, overly producing something, right, even providing somebody with the answer, like the questions in advance, can create a feeling of it being scripted, which can create a feeling of it being fake, which is the exact opposite of what you are pursuing with a testimonial. The entire purpose of a testimonial is authentic, trustworthy information from a uninterested party about your business. And if it begins to smack of a feeling of fakeness, you're going to destroy that, right? Like you're losing the credibility that is vital to this being a functional part of your marketing.
Now, because we've mentioned like, hey, you should have like a list of questions and not necessarily coaching them, but kind of guiding them. Is there a way that you can still keep that authenticity while still having all that, the guide and the...
No, for sure. It's about not giving people... You need to prep somewhat, right? You need to know what questions you're going to ask. That's all fine. It's about creating space for the subject matter, the person giving you the testimonial, to give their authentic responses to those questions, right? So you can always ask like a secondary question if you notice something that you think would be valuable, right? So if somebody, like, you ask them the question like, what's your favorite feature in your new kitchen? And they talk to you about it, but they give you a very simple answer. And they say like, oh yeah, I really like these countertops, right? Don't just stop there. Ask them another question. You can probe them further, but make sure that it's a discussion, right? Don't have them go away and write down this sort of nicely worded answer about what they think about the project, because when they come back, it's going to sound like they're reading a script.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not that you cannot plan for anything or that you cannot sort of push people to give you the kind of answers that you need. It's not even that you can't, right, like edit in such a way that makes them seem more coherent. It is that you need the authenticity in the way they present themselves and the tone of their voice. People are very tuned in to people that are not doing that in a way that is real, and it's not well received. So as long as you are giving the homeowner or person who purchased your service the space to have a real response to your question and not a planned response, then you're going to be good to go.
Now, what if you get through the whole project? You ask them to do the testimonial, you get it from them, and it's not as great as you thought it would be, or
Sure,
it's a negative one even.
Yeah.
What do you do with that? Do you still run it?
Definitely don't run a negative testimonial.
Okay.
100% not.
Okay.
Just because you have invested time in something does
Right.
not mean that it is going to be useful or beneficial to your business.
Okay. So you can possibly get spend time on this, spend money on this, and it's actually not good.
Yes.
That's a risk.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, but that is the risk you take for authenticity, right? And that's the reality. And honestly, if it doesn't end up being a piece of advertising for you, it's something you can still learn from.
Okay.
Right? You now have a record of the exact feelings of a customer that didn't have a positive experience. So take that back to your production team. Take that to your sales team. Take that to your customer service team. Whoever needs to hear the feedback of that individual, use it. It's still useful to your business. It's not going to be useful necessarily in a lead gen perspective, but it will be useful for the next time, right? Because that customer will identify things that you can do differently. And if you do those things differently on the next project, the next person isn't going to have those same complaints, right? And so you will work your way towards having a really great customer experience that people are willing to rave about at the end.
Okay. So it's not all complete loss. You still learn from it. You can move forward.
For sure.
So it's still worth doing it.
Yeah,
no matter
100%.
what.
It's worth doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, getting feedback from unhappy clients is worth it in its own capacity, even if you don't record it, right? That information is critical to you developing as a business.
Now, what advice would you have for a contractor who they've never done testimonials, but they want to get started? What are some first steps that they need to do?
Yeah, so I'd say up front, it can be really valuable to find somebody to help you out, right? Like if you're not a videographer, you're not an editor, you've not done interviews before, right? Like it can be really useful, even if it's just like, hey, this is my learning opportunity. Seeing somebody do it and do it well will give you a lot of information for how to go about that yourself. You can, again, like iPhone shot content can be very effective, especially on social ads, right? It works pretty well. So if you can get to a place where you've got like a little like rig for your iPhone and you feel like confident that you can do it yourself, give it a try, right? Like go out and talk to somebody and give it a go and see how it works out, right? But really, truly, when it comes to the actual like technology piece and the videography piece, I do recommend that you find a professional. It's going to be a lot smoother of an experience. So yeah, I mean that's my personal opinion. Granted, right, there are plenty of people that are capable of learning the basics, especially on their iPhone and doing it themselves.
So do you hire somebody? Like, is this a job, just to get testimonials?
I don't know if I would hire somebody just to get testimonials, but I would hire a videographer for my business and have them do testimonials as a part of what they do.
Fair.
For sure,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, having a videographer on staff is huge, especially if you have a product that is highly visual, right, and highly design
Contractor work definitely is. Yeah.
So if you are the kind of business that benefits from people seeing your work, video is immensely valuable because it is going to bleed basically into all your marketing, right? The same ways like all these different channels that I'm talking about using these testimonials in, you can use all sorts of other video in those channels too, and it's very effective, right? So for sure, I think everybody, if you can afford it, hire a videographer, right? And then make testimonials a part of their job.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, again, Ian, I mean, that's all I've got on testimonials.
Cool.
Thank you for joining the podcast again.
Yeah.
And killing it.
Yeah, well, it's a good time. As you said, I got a lot of words, so I like to talk, and it's essentially what this is.
And you said what's up without me having to prompt you.
I know.
Which is great. You're learning.
That's good.
Yeah, great. So that's what we have for testimonials. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Check out our YouTube. Check out contractorgrowthnetwork.com. We have resources for everything you need to know about marketing in the contractor space.
Sweet. Hope to do this again soon.
Me too.